Hello and welcome back to another Grow Network segment, another interview. This is Marjory Wildcraft, of course. And today we have with me is John Bush, who is the founder of the Live Free Academy. And John has been a friend and an ally for the Grow Network for many years. Gosh, I think even going back to 2007, 2008, we both used to live in Central Texas, and John had like a radio station, all kinds of stuff he was doing. Then he ended up owning a really cool bookstore. He's always been involved with the sovereignty movement and always involved with liberty and making people aware of what's actually going on to have all of us be more controlled. An early adopter, being a young guy of cryptos. And so I want to welcome John Bush to the call.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Always a pleasure.
And I just love it. I actually took John's training several years ago and found it fantastic, and it gave me a jump start. So what I did, John, is I've got a list of questions that I have gathered from the Grow Network community, and we are going to fire off these questions and have you answer them. Lots of people have lots of questions. They also want to get to know you and see if maybe your training is right for them. So first of all, is Bitcoin a scam? Is it something that was created by the deep state and is actually something that they're going to use to control us and manipulate us? What's your take on Bitcoin?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in our community that are doing themselves a great disservice by not venturing into the Bitcoin space because they fear it's some tool of the New World Order, when in all reality, Bitcoin and privacy coins like Monero are the best tool that we have to continue to do business online with one another, even as their central bank digital currency system gets rolled out. So there's a lot of misunderstandings out there. People point to this 1996 paper by the NSA that was about creating a cryptographic currency. People speculate about who Satoshi Nakamoto was. In all reality, when you do the research and you dive deeper, you come to find that there's this long history of cypherpunks or like internet geeks that want to create freedom on the internet ever since the internet was first unleashed onto the world. And they were experimenting with internet money for decades. Encrypted internet money, cryptography, which is like sending a message, but it's coded, and then the person that receives it can decode it. So if you trace this lineage and you trace the experiments that they had with sovereign internet money, basically, you come to find that Bitcoin actually pulls different pieces from some of the research and the technologies they created. And it was Satoshi Nakamoto, he, she, they, them. I think it's either one of these cypherpunk people or maybe a group of them. Satoshi Nakamoto finally figured it out. They figured out how to have decentralized money where there's not a centralized point of failure that the government can shut down or can subpoena in court. And then on top of that, they figured out how to avoid double spending, where you have a digital unit that can be replicated. So all of that is avoided with Bitcoin. So ultimately, I do not think it's New World Order money. I think it's extremely unlikely. And ultimately, when you look at what the ramifications are of Bitcoin and decentralized technology, it really is a very powerful defense against the centralization and the surveillance that the government and the World Economic Forum and the predator class are trying to do with our financial world.
Yeah, thank you. And I might add on to that, I've been watching alternative currencies for decades, and anything that gains any traction is usually immediately shut down in one way or the other by the government under all kinds of false pretenses. And I saw Bitcoin when it first came out, and I was like, I don't know, this looks like they're going to slam this, but they haven't, or they can't. And it's been around now for long enough. I think this is a thing. It's established. It's not going away. The whole crypto space is a new form of money that's coming out. So you have gold and silver and fiat currencies like the US dollar. And I believe that the cryptos will play an important role in money going forward. So in my opinion, it's here and it's not going away. So might as well learn about it and get on with it, right? So Another question that came up is, can Bitcoin be shut down or censored? Like could a hacker or a corporation or a government be able to like get in there and destroy it or shut it down?
Yeah. So when this comes up, and these are great questions, these are the most common objections that I hear from my audience and from our freedom community in general. I often ask people when they bring that up as an objection or concern, how many years have to go by with Bitcoin working exactly as it should be without being hacked whatsoever, without new coins being created maliciously before people kind of accept that, wow, it's actually working as it's intended. So the encryption algorithm that Bitcoin uses, SHA-256, all right? You don't need to know all the specifics, but essentially that's what secures the network. So it would take, in fact, even if you have quantum computers and all sorts of computing power, statistically, mathematically, it would be extremely difficult to crack this algorithm. And essentially how the blockchain works, right? So Bitcoin is decentralized. The blockchain is a collection of all the transactions that have taken place, and that collection is stored on a digital file. And that digital file is decentralized and distributed on tens of thousands of computers all across the globe in a variety of different countries. So this is really the great innovation that is Bitcoin, because in the past, we've had to rely on centralized parties, governments, banks to maintain a ledger, right? Just saying who owns what, who has what money, just like a bank does. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, we can't trust the banks, we can't trust the government. So
Or
the
the big
cool thing
corporations?
about yeah, the cool thing about this blockchain is that it takes information about who owns what Bitcoin, who sent what Bitcoin to whom, what their new balance is, and it distributes it and decentralizes it on a whole lot of computers. So essentially, even if one nation state were to try to ban Bitcoin, like China did, for example, they tried to ban Bitcoin mining, which is how you verify the transactions that take place on the network. It takes a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of computing power and energy to do that. China
Mm-hmm.
banned Bitcoin mining, and there was still Bitcoin mining going on in the most authoritarian regime. So, because this network is decentralized and distributed, it's extremely resilient and anti-fragile. And people say, well, they're going to shut down the internet. You'd literally have to shut down the internet every single place in the entire globe. If that were to happen, we'd have a lot bigger problems than our Bitcoin balance. But even
Yes.
still, if there was an EMP or the electricity or the internet goes down in Texas, for example, the record of what Bitcoin I own is still stored on all the other computers. And because only I have the private keys, which we could talk about in a little bit,
We
I'm
will.
can
Yeah.
still access those once the internet comes back up. And then another thing, Bitcoin's been around since 2009. That's when the software was launched. There's a record of all the transactions that's stored on the blockchain. And that record is what's called immutable, meaning it can't be changed. So every time a new block gets added to the blockchain, again, a block is a collection of transactions that took place in the approximately previous 10 minutes. So every time a new block gets added, that record is basically enshrined because of the encryption algorithms they use. So no, it's basically impossible to go back and try to alter the record and say, in fact, that person sent me 3 Bitcoin when they only sent 1. So really what we're looking at is the most secure financial network that's ever been created. And the beauty of it all is that it's not created by a government. It's not created by a bank or a corporation. It's basically like a public utility, completely decentralized and gifted to the world. So to answer your question, I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but compared to everything else that we have, and based on my research and having a basic understanding of encryption and the mathematics behind it all, it's virtually impossible to hack, crack, or to scam the Bitcoin network. That doesn't mean that if you don't set up your wallet correctly, you can't have a mistake or lose Bitcoin, or someone can hack into your computer. And if you don't put a password on your wallet, you can't run into trouble. Or if you store crypto on an exchange, there can't be trouble there. But if you do everything properly, if you follow some set guidelines that are really important, then it's a very, very secure way to store wealth and to send and receive money.
That's awesome. We do have some more questions for those of you that are listening on wallets and exchanges and some of these other concepts. But if I could summarize this, Bitcoin itself is actually distributed over tens of thousands of computers, and you can actually be a part of that if you wanted to. but there's also so much redundancy and duplication. And then once something's set, like you've done a transaction, that becomes a permanent piece of the blockchain history, which can't be changed. And there's duplicate records of it all over the place. So even if Texas does go down, there's lots of other nodes that are still up and functioning with that correct information.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's phenomenal, really.
Yeah. So the other thing that's coming up and people talk about, and you've talked about a lot in your newsletters, people want to, what is the difference between, Bitcoin and a CBDC? I guess maybe we should first come out with what is a CBDC and then distinguish how it's different and why you might want to avoid those guys.
Definitely. So a central bank digital currency is this concept that central banks, they're the issuer of monies, right? The Federal Reserve's the central bank in the US, the European Central Bank. They want to create a digital currency. So, money right now, the US dollar, for example, is mostly a bunch of ones and zeros. There's very little actual cash that makes up the dollar. But what a central bank digital currency would do would effectively create all money being digital. All money would be digital, and it would be very easy to surveil. So there's already financial surveillance. This would make it easy to surveil, track, analyze every single transaction. And then the big worry would be that the central bank digital currencies would be programmable. So imagine a all digital currency. It's all completely tracked. The government knows every single transaction that you purchase, everything you sell and buy. But on top of that, let's say that it's coupled with a monthly carbon allotment. World Economic Forum's talking about this My Pass or My Carbon Pass. So, of course, we know the Agenda 21 and the United Nations are all pushing this control through environmentalism. Let's say that every household is only given a certain amount of carbon that they could put out into the atmosphere, blah, 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 per month. Now, all of a sudden that you've exceeded your carbon allotment. So now you go to pump gas or purchase a flight, and it's either exceedingly expensive or perhaps you're barred from traveling to go visit your mother in another city because you've exceeded your carbon allotment. Let's say that the healthcare system becomes even more onerous and it's like Obamacare 2.0 and your cholesterol's too high and you go to purchase a Twinkie and it has a tax on it or you can't even buy it at all. Or the scariest scenario, you're watching a subversive website like the Grow Network, or I know growing food and preparing is so subversive nowadays, but you go to a protest or you contribute to the trucker convoy or this big thing going on in Germany right now with the farmers, and all of a sudden you're barred from this or that. It's not just speculation or conspiracy theory. It's actually what the head of the Bank of International Settlements and all sorts of different major financial institutions are calling for. So that's a big concern. And of course, the big difference between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and central bank digital currencies, one is being pushed by the power elite, the predator class. One is centralized. It's not decentralized. It's not even really blockchain technology. It's just issuing these tokens. It'll make it even easier to inflate the currency. It's highly surveilled and all about control. And the Bitcoins and the decentralized cryptocurrencies are about freedom, and they're about allowing people to do business with one another without anybody being able to get in the way and put a stop to it. So you got centralized, decentralized, heavily surveilled, more transparent, and there are privacy coins like Monero that are completely secret who sends what to whom. One's issued by the Federal Reserve, the central banks. One is issued by the people and by this transparent open source computer program.
Yeah, I thank you. And I have two things to add to that. One is I've read about scenarios where, if they want to stimulate the economy, they'll add more CBDCs to your account. But if they decide that they need to slow things down, then they'll just say, okay, well, you have to spend this money within 3 days or we're going to wipe it out. Yep. So they have complete control over your account. And that's a horrifying thought. Oh, yeah. The other thing is Bitcoin has a maximum number, and most cryptocurrencies that come out have a maximum number that can be mined or minted, or we'll get a little bit more into some of the distinctions of that with some of the other questions we have. But I believe there's only 21 million Bitcoin that could ever exist, whereas the CBDCs are just like US dollars, like, oh, we need another trillion? let's just create it and spend it, so there's always, it's just like a fiat currency, basically, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes. So that's actually one of the reasons why Bitcoin is so valuable. Early on, I got into it as a way to push back on the Federal Reserve and as a freedom thing, right?
Hmm.
I knew that it was going to be valuable. The writing was on the wall. But as of late, major financial institutions, of course, BlackRock, Vanguard, all these ETFs are hopping on board. Um, and
We've got a question about that coming up, so yeah.
yeah, and so they're seeing the value that lies in this currency, in addition to us freedom people seeing that we can do business without anyone getting in the way. A lot of people, myself included, are seeing it's extremely valuable because it has a finite supply. That means that there will only ever be up to 21 million Bitcoin. Many of them are already like lost and kind of
Yeah,
disappeared, or people
I've heard of that. Yeah,
lost their wallet. So really excited about that. And as you know, the more that you can inflate something, the less valuable those things are. And so Bitcoin is hard capped. It's encoded in the computer program. And that's something that's really special for the value. It's deflationary instead of inflationary.
awesome. And just another quick warning to you out there. Um, the CBDCs, there, some of the conversations that are happening among the alternative media is saying, look, they're going to really make things really, really bad and try to force you into CBDCs because you won't be able to buy food, or food's going to be expensive, or there's going to be some big crisis, and the CBDCs will be coming in supposedly as the hero. So I want to give you a heads up that the CBDCs are not something we want to engage in and participate in. And that's why I'm actually having John on, to have everybody become more aware of it, and also to be able to prepare by getting into these other alternatives, such as Bitcoin and some of the others. John, how many cryptos are there out there? That was another question we had.
There is a lot. There's 12,172 right now, and that number is always growing, and then a bunch of them are just going away. But I would say, I remember when there was like 10, it just
Yeah.
barely started. I would say that 99.9% of them are utter garbage and should absolutely be avoided. It's just people making a token, trying to make some money. Some of them are fly by night. You got to ask yourself, like, what's the actual utility behind this cryptocurrency? What's the use case, the
Mm-hmm.
unique selling proposition? So I encourage people to really focus on just a small handful and avoid most of them.
I agree, and it's like the beginning of any new industry, like the airline industry when it first started out, or the newspaper when the printing press came out. There were hundreds, actually, there were hundreds of railroads around the United States, and they all ended up getting consolidated. And that happens in any industry. There's a flurry of innovation and lots of small stuff happening everywhere, and then eventually a lot of them get consolidated or go away. So, and we're seeing that in the crypto space also. So let's talk a little bit. You'd mentioned what is the difference between a wallet and an exchange? We have a question here from John and Mary and Celine.
Okay, sure. So an exchange is a place where you can take your fiat currency and you set up an exchange account. Now, more
Hmm.
often than not, actually almost every single time, you have to do what's known as know your customer. So this is where you scan your driver's license, part of the Bank Secrecy Act. There's ways to purchase cryptocurrency with fiat that don't require that.
Hmm.
To use an exchange like Coinbase, for example, which is the most popular exchange, you got to do this KYC process. You link your bank account. You can then withdraw money from your checking account, deposit it into your exchange account, and then purchase cryptocurrency. And so that's an exchange, right? Exchanges have wallets built in, but the key thing to be aware is that these exchanges have what's known as a custodial wallet. Now,
Hmm.
you contrast that with a non-custodial wallet, and
Hmm.
Exodus is the wallet that I recommend lately,
Yeah.
exodus.com. It's a multi-wallet, has multiple different types of cryptocurrencies. So essentially what a non-custodial wallet is a wallet where you have total control over your cryptocurrency. And here's the reason why. A wallet essentially is just a piece of software that creates private key, public key combinations and allows you to interface, send and receive money on a blockchain. And so essentially what a public key is, also known as a public address, it's kind of like your account number. So Marjory, if you wanted to send me a Bitcoin, a whopping whole Bitcoin, I would give you my public address, and then you would send Bitcoin to that address. Now, whoever has the private key that corresponds with the public address, they can unlock access and send Bitcoin to someone else. And so the thing about a non-custodial wallet is only you have access to that private key. So you have total control over your money. This is basically unheard of in the financial system, whether you have your money in a checking account, in Venmo or PayPal or whatever it may be. Even gold can physically be confiscated, right? Now you can take some security measures, you can hide it really well, but it's something that can be taken. If you have this private key and you memorize your encryption password, it can't be confiscated from you. But the key thing to be aware of is you can use an exchange to purchase Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, but it's really important that once you amass even a small or moderate amount, you then send it and transfer it to your non-custodial wallet, because these exchanges, they could be subpoenaed if you get in trouble with the government. They've been hacked in the past. They've been known to be total frauds, like with FTX and the Sam
Yes.
Bankman-Fried goofy
Yep.
character. So if you purchase on an exchange, you send to your non-custodial wallet, you back up your non-custodial wallet properly using some simple steps, then effectively you have total control over that cryptocurrency, and it's extremely safe, and it's very much protected from confiscation or from any errors or fraud or scam.
Yeah, and thank you. I actually use the Exodus wallet based on, I did your course about 3 years ago. And so basically the idea is I've got a wallet and you've got a wallet, and I can directly send you money from my wallet to your wallet, just as if I were going to hand you $100, or, as if, or a piece of gold. I mean, it's just like a transaction that's completely private to the two of us, and we just do it from wallet to wallet. Whereas an exchange is kind of like a bank in some ways, in my mind, like you put in your US dollars, and then you can turn that into Bitcoin or a lot of different things. It's almost kind of like people ask me about cryptocurrencies and they say, how are they different? I said, well, you should think of cryptocurrencies almost like foreign currencies. When you go to the airport in Mexico, you go to an exchange and you give the US dollars to get your Mexican pesos, right? Although the cryptos are clearly not fiat currencies, but yeah, you definitely don't want to keep, just like you really don't want to keep your money in the bank. You don't want to keep your money on the exchange. I was having a conversation with somebody recently. You don't realize when you deposit your money in the bank, it's not your money anymore. That they actually have all kinds of rights to it. And I think even Coinbase mentioned a while ago that if they push came to shove, they could use all their users' funds if they had a liquidity crisis or if they had some other issues. So, I, like, as you're saying, I use the exchange to turn my US dollars into something else, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, and then I immediately get that off the exchange into my own private wallet. So, yeah, thank you for that distinction. So what happens? I mean, all of this is digital, right? What happens if the grid goes down? And you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but that was a specific question. Gosh, we had Lucy and Sarah, Tom. There was a whole bunch of people that asked about, like, the grid goes down. What are we going to do?
Great question. So I'm not someone that encourages like everyone go all in on Bitcoin and that's your only solution for, overcoming CBDCs or protecting your wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to take a multifaceted approach, but ultimately at the end of the day, if the grid goes down, it's extremely unlikely that we're going to have a global grid down scenario. And again, if we do,
It's a totally different scenario.
Yeah, and I hope you've been taking Marjory's advice and getting prepared for years now, because you're going to be in a world of trouble if not. And like your Bitcoin's going to be the least of your worries. But if the grid goes down in a given area, as I shared before, as soon as the grid is restored or internet access is restored, then you're going to be able to access your crypto once again. That's the beauty of Bitcoin, unlike Visa or your bank, which has a centralized server. Maybe there's even a couple or a few, but like on Fight Club, how they took down the bank credit card server thing or whatever at the end. If there's an EMP or if there's a grid down scenario in a given area and all your money is with Visa or with Wells Fargo, then you're going to be in a world of trouble. But because this ledger blockchain is decentralized and distributed, it makes it extremely resilient, extremely anti-fragile. So in the short term, you won't be able to send and receive crypto. You actually can if you hand code the stuff, but I'm not going to be learning how to do that anyway. As soon as the grid comes back up, you're going to be back in business. But I really want to caution people, like in the work that I do at Live Free Academy, we focus a lot on mindset. So when I hear objections and concerns, I often try to dig a little bit deeper and see like, okay, what's really going on here? And oftentimes people are kind of looking for reasons for it not to work. Sometimes because they think that they missed the boat and they're like, oh, well, I should have got in earlier. I didn't. So I kind of want to justify not getting in earlier. You didn't miss the boat, by the way. We still got a long way.
We got a long ways to go.
For sure. But I would encourage people like, don't limit your ability to benefit yourself, to create this freedom, to create this unconfiscatable wealth opportunity. Don't avoid that due to some unforeseen future outcome that may never happen. I mean, maybe the grid goes down in your area. Maybe it never does. I mean, I've been waiting for collapse since 2007. Still man, this system sure is propped up pretty damn well. They just keep printing money. Hence the reason why Bitcoin's so damn valuable nowadays. But I would encourage people like try not to think of reasons that it can't work. And instead, let's focus on how it is working right now and benefiting a whole lot of people. But like I said, at the end of the day, if power goes down in your area, it's only a matter of time before it goes back up. You're going to be able to access your crypto once again because it's decentralized and distributed.
Yes. So it's strong enough that it's going to rebuild itself as soon as you get back online again. So, yeah. Okay. So some people, and we've talked about this a little bit, but I question that came up specifically, and it's a phrase you'll hear over and over again. I love it, and it's a great lesson. It's called, and people go, what does it mean when people say, not your keys, not your crypto? What does that phrase mean? Lots of folks asked about this. Yeah.
Fundamentally important. And so again, a Bitcoin wallet it's a computer software that creates private key, public key combinations. And ultimately, whenever you send and receive crypto, it'll get stored or tied to an address. Whoever has that private key, they control the money, the cryptocurrency tied to the public address. Mm-hmm. So if you purchase crypto on an exchange, you actually don't get access to that private key. You have no control over it. It's just like with the bank. It's like a promise that we're going to hold your money, but in all reality, they have no obligation to turn over that money to you. Mm-hmm. Same thing with an exchange. So while it's a great tool to use to get your crypto with fiat, it's really critical that you send that crypto to a non-custodial wallet, because a non-custodial wallet, again, it's like a custodian who has the custodianship over this asset. A non-custodial wallet, you're the custodian. And the reason why you're the custodian is because you and only you have access to that private key. Now, it's something that's on the back end of a wallet. You don't ever really have to mess with the private key. You can't access them. Really, when you set up a wallet, you're presented with what's known as a seed phrase. Mm-hmm. This is a 12, 18, or 24 word phrase. This is what you write down on a piece of paper with a pen, or you etch it in steel. There's all sorts of great ways to store it. But ultimately, that's what allows you to back up your wallet, to restore your wallet if your computer fails, if you lose your phone, if your phone is stolen, or if you're like my wife. We weren't together at the time because this wouldn't have happened, but she dropped her phone in a porta potty. It had like 1.5 Bitcoin back when they were worth like $400 each. It was like $600. I still would have dove in and got it, but she didn't want to mess with it. She was at a concert, whatever. Anyway, had she backed it up properly by writing down the 12, 18, or 24 word seed phrase, that's called the master private key. Mm-hmm. It basically controls the entire wallet, all the different addresses you could have in the wallet. She would have been able to restore it right away. So non-custodial wallet is critical. I recommend people to use Exodus. It allows you to do Bitcoin, Monero, Ethereum, and it's very simple to use as long as you follow these simple steps in order to back it up and use it securely. So yeah, not your keys, not your coins. If you don't have that private key, someone else has access to the private key, and you don't truly own or control that money, which is really the big benefit of cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I've had some people be concerned, like, oh my God, what if I forget my seed phrase or whatever? And I'm like, well, you know what? Your own wallet that you have right now is something that you take care of, and it's precious, and you hold it and you make sure you've got it. And if you lose your wallet, then you do what you need to do to remedy that, right? Like, so it's just like that. It's just like your own personal wealth management tool. It's digital and it's online. So yeah, and you don't want to lose your keys because it's just like losing your wallet. Like those wallets cannot be recovered. So absolutely great idea to write it down on paper or some way and then stick it in the safe, or you know, make sure you've got it in a secure location. But the private key is your key, and again, you aren't wanting that on an exchange. But yeah, again, thank you. I use Exodus and I love it. So now the potential for the market. You know, you and I have been talking about. I fully believe that, and I appreciate your comments earlier that having some cryptos is one component of being prepared for the times that we live in and the massive changes that we are already undergoing. And I believe that's just going to accelerate. And that collapse will be coming soon. Collapse coming to a civilization near you soon. But if you're prepared for it, and most of the folks in the Grow Network are, in some way with food and medicine and other preps, we've also done real well getting people equipped with some precious metals. And I think cryptos are another component to that. But the market has huge potential to be other than a preservation of wealth, to really blow up. And what's recently been in the news is that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, has approved some ETFs, electronically traded funds, that are available. So this would be, you could go onto the stock market and then buy into this, which I don't recommend, to companies like BlackRock or JP Morgan or Fidelity. Massively huge companies now have these ETFs. And would you want to talk a little bit about like what is the potential for Bitcoin prices, crypto prices in general, now that like that just got approved the day before yesterday as we're recording this?
Yeah, this is a really big deal. Earlier, I said Vanguard ETF. Vanguard doesn't have an ETF. In fact, they're not allowing Bitcoin ETFs on their platform if you have like a Roth IRA or whatever. So just to correct that real quick, this is a huge deal. So it's a great legitimizer for Bitcoin. We already knew Bitcoin was more legitimate than the legacy financial institutions, but the Securities and Exchange Commission here in the US has been pushing back and resisting immensely. There's this court case that kind of forced them to allow this. But essentially, what this represents is, in my view, the legacy financial institutions are recognizing that their customers, their clients, they want to protect wealth, to grow wealth using this decentralized, finite digital asset. And they resisted it for so long because in many ways it's an anathema, right? Like it's an antagonist. It's the opposite of what they have with centralization, with the ability to create money out of thin air. And so this is like a great vindicator for Bitcoin. To me, it also represents, because a lot of people will be like, well, BlackRock's going to come in and take over Bitcoin and co-opt it. What if Bitcoin is kind of co-opting the old school way of doing things, right? And I think this is just the beginning. I strongly believe that central banks will hold Bitcoin on their balance sheets, much like they hold gold. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are some people that are frustrated, people like that are really into the freedom thing, and they see that BlackRock's the bad guy with all the ESG stuff. But in all reality, if you believe like I do that Bitcoin is like the best asset that's ever been created, in large part because it's so finite, more finite than gold, right? Bitcoin's digitally finite. Gold, when the price goes up, they put more money into mining gold and there's more gold found. There could be gold in asteroids and such. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And so for this to be such a valuable hard asset, it's only inevitable that these large financial institutions are going to get involved. So what does this mean for the price? Well, the fact that there's only 21 million Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever they or them, he or she was, they hold, a couple million of them. It's argued that, 2 or 3 million are lost. And this
Yeah.
isn't really, and this doesn't take account into the price. A lot of people aren't aware of that. So really it's more scarce than many people even believe. Because it's so scarce, there's a very high competition to acquire these coins. And in fact, there's fewer coins available on an exchange for sale and trade than ever before. So now we have these large financial institutions. On the opening day, there was like $4.5 billion worth of these ETFs that were purchased, these ETF shares, right? And so the fund managers for these ETFs, they have to go buy the underlying asset, the Bitcoin, after these ETF shares are purchased. So you have folks like me that are holding on for dear life. I'm
Yeah,
not selling
hodlers.
Bitcoin to the BlackRock fund manager, right? And there's very small amount of Bitcoin available. There's even smaller amount available on exchange for sale. The number of Bitcoin that get created with every block, that's how Bitcoin are created. A new block gets added to the blockchain. And every new block that gets added, the mining computers that verify the transactions are rewarded with new Bitcoin. Well, every approximately 4 years, the number of new Bitcoin gets cut in half. And that's about to happen this year in 2024. So not only are there fewer Bitcoin available for sale on exchanges, there's going to be fewer Bitcoin that are getting generated every 10 minutes approximately. And there's more and more people like me and Marjory that are like getting real stingy with our Bitcoin.
They're
I'm
not
looking at
selling.
it as a legacy play, pass it on to my kids in the future when one Bitcoin's maybe worth $250,000, $500,000, maybe even $1 million in 2030, which isn't unheard of.
No.
You can borrow against it, right? And when you borrow against it, that's not income. So there's all sorts of plays that can be had. But ultimately, I think that now that the big boys are getting involved, and because there's such a finite number and all the factors I shared, I think we're only going to see some pretty incredible price action. So for the folks that wish they would have got in when we were talking about it, when it was like $1,000 or 17,000, people think they missed the boat. In all reality, the sails aren't even set yet. We're still building the boat. We're about to leave the harbor, and there's still an opportunity to get involved. And like you said, it's not only an opportunity to preserve wealth, because I recognize a lot of people have worked hard their whole life. They got the pension fund or the 401k, and that's all funny money, the Wall Street roller coaster. If it's dollar denominated, it's only losing value. That's one thing we can be sure of. Uh, People are having their wealth extracted from them, and that's wrong. And Bitcoin not only represents a way to protect from that, but ultimately it represents a way to build some wealth and grow some wealth as well.
Yeah. So if I could summarize that, really there's a finite amount of Bitcoin that's available, maybe only just a few million because some have been lost. There's only a few more left to mine. And then the rest of us who bought it early on, I'm not selling, right? Like you'd be crazy to sell Bitcoin right now, right? So there's only actually a few million Bitcoin available for sale. And what the ETFs do is allow, and all of the price of Bitcoin now, which is, as we're recording this, about $45,000, that price has been created by you and me and just small people, right? Individual people. It's not necessarily big institutions. Now with these ETFs, because your retirement account or your mutual fund or your insurance company, they could not invest in Bitcoin. They could not invest in cryptos directly. But now with an ETF, that's a structure that they are legally allowed to invest in. So we're talking about multiple billions of dollars that can be and will be poured into these ETFs in order for the retirement funds or the insurance companies or the banks or all these other entities to be able to have access to the Bitcoin market. So we're talking about a potential flood of money coming in. So it's going to be real fun to watch the rise. I agree with that. I think if you miss the boat, then you haven't missed the boat. There's still a lot more.
No, and if I could add, there's actually trillions of dollars that are now available to flow in. A lot of this money was locked up in retirement accounts, in pension funds, in IRAs, 401ks, right? And so there's a ton of money now. And one thing that Spirko pointed out in this podcast he did recently, Jack Spirko, he pointed out that, for all the people that are saying they're going to ban Bitcoin, now that there's an ETF, now that public school teacher unions, law
Yeah.
enforcement unions, they're going to have that on their balance sheet for their pension funds. the government doesn't like to mess with these public sector employee unions, right? They hold a lot of influence. So
Yeah.
for these unions and such to start buying up Bitcoin, and then the government comes in and says it's some bad money laundering tool, or what Senator Elizabeth Warren gets her way, which she rarely ever does. I think she's only ever passed one piece of legislation. She's a big opponent of crypto. I think it's highly unlikely that the genie's going to go back into the bottle now. I think this is a big approval and recognition that this is a legitimate asset class.
Yeah, and the potential for it to go. Now, one of the downsides of it, by the way, but never buy an ETF. That's almost dumb. It's almost like buying SLV, buying silver in the ETF for silver. Buy the physical silver, don't go buying this stock market stuff. You have no idea. So the ETF for you and me is not anything worth doing. Go buy the actual Bitcoin and put it in your wallet and own it yourself. It's this very same analogy of, if you want to invest in silver, don't go invest in SLV, the ETF. Go buy silver from a reputable silver dealer. So cryptos have been notoriously volatile, and I'm just curious. So we talked about the potential future. I'm pricing, and I definitely believe that Bitcoin, we will see, $100,000 Bitcoin parties, and I think Bitcoin is even going to go a lot higher than that. All the cryptos will, because the US dollar, they're printing and printing and printing all of it more. So people are looking for other ways to invest money to get out of US dollars. But what's your opinion on the volatility, and what's your strategy to deal with that emotionally?
So cryptocurrency has definitely been crazy volatile. A lot of it has to do with, there's been some uncertainty when it comes to the financial markets. We do have more certainty now, kind of a stamp of approval with this ETF. Additionally, as there's more money that flows into this space, that will help to create more stability and equilibrium with the price. But there's a great strategy that I teach for people to avoid and mitigate that volatility, because the last thing you want to do is buy high and sell low. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. You got to take your emotions out of dealing with this market, and in any market for that matter. The strategy is called dollar cost averaging. So you determine, all right, I feel that I can invest $500 a month, or 1,000, or 250, or 5,000, whatever, depending on someone's financial status. And you're like, on the 15th of every month, I'm going to execute this buy. And there's different platforms that enable you to do that. So that's effectively a way to continue to purchase and to avoid the volatility, the ups and downs. But one thing to be aware, regardless, even though there's ups and downs, those ups and downs historically with cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, not all cryptocurrencies, but the major ones, those ups and downs have always gone up overall in the long term. So there's ways to mitigate that volatility. I expect there's going to be more volatility, but in the future, as more money pours into this space, we will get closer to discovering what the true price is. And again, because the dollar is going down in value, because it's such a scarce asset, I suspect the price is only going to continue to rise over time.
Yeah. Know why you're investing in it, and hodl. I'm HODL, hold on for dear life, and that's my thing. I mean, I've bought some coins, tokens, and they went down. My portfolio was down 85% for a while there, but I knew why I had bought them and what I was investing in, and I'm like, I'm fine. I wish I could have bought it now at the bottom, but picking the bottom is really, really hard. So I agree. I think there's going to be more volatility, but it probably will tend to smooth out eventually, just because it starts to become such a big market. Now, so we're talking about wallets and crypto and exchanges. This is all new stuff. A lot of folks in the Grow Network are not very tech savvy. And this was a question that came up, quite a few folks, Nikki and Jimerson. Is it possible for someone who only has basic tech skills, such as, maybe they can check their email and they can do texting and maybe a little bit of surfing, is that enough to be able to buy and use cryptos? Is it easy enough to do?
So it can be learned, right? A lot of people that are like, I can only do email and texting. There was a point where email felt overwhelming and was like, what the heck is this new thing? I'm used to writing a letter and mailing it. And some people are like, oh, I'll never be able to learn that. But now they have a Facebook profile and they're mixing it up with their grandkids, right? So it can be learned. And it can be learned, especially if you have a good teacher. And if you really focus in on, you know, one teacher, or at least like there's so much information out there, and some of it is charlatan and some of it's misinformation and some of it'll lead you down a rabbit hole or send you into some altcoin that should probably be avoided. But if you have a good teacher, and really if you believe in your ability to learn, so back to the mindset thing, having taught thousands of people how to do Bitcoin from various levels of technical ability, one thing I recognize is like, if you struggle with technology, there are going to be some bumps along the road. But if you're like, okay, I'm committed to learning this because I know it's so important for my financial future, for my freedom when these CBDC things come out. If you can commit to learning and recognize there's going to be some struggles along the way, but I'm going to push through, I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to persevere, I strongly believe that anybody can learn it. And I've taught folks that are advanced, and I've taught a whole lot of beginners. And everybody really gets excited once they have that eureka. They get the wallet installed, they acquire their first crypto, they send and receive cryptocurrency. They're like, wow, I never thought I'd be able to learn this. And it really is fulfilling to see people do that. So to answer your question, yeah, people that aren't super tech savvy can learn. They just have to be committed to the learning process.
Got it. And, I really do want to credit your course for really taking me up a whole leg up on being able to create a wallet and learning more about the back end. In fact, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen. And so here I am in my account at the Live Free Academy, the Bitcoin basics for beginners and basics for boomers and beginners. Boom, boom. All right. So I'm going to blow this up a little tiny bit. Introduction to the workshop. Why Bitcoin? The cypherpunks. Oh my gosh, you mentioned that a little bit. Peer-to-peer networks. What is blockchain technology? There's a lot more here. How to review on how Bitcoin works. What is mining? Now, some of this you may or may, this is all built so people can just jump into different segments, right? So Bitcoin versus Monero. And here is the great section on how to set up a wallet. And I can see you've really broken it down into small pieces. Best practices for backing up your wallet, helping troubleshoot. And module 3 is how to acquire Bitcoins, what we were talking about, getting an exchange. You got the whole big picture going on there. And then different exchanges, how to purchase Bitcoin with Strike, with Sware. Oh, there's a bunch of these I need to come back and review. You've really updated this since I took it before. Peer-to-peer exchanges. Some do's and don'ts. I love that. And some Q&A. How to use Bitcoin to trade. So buying goods and services. That's really cool. And join in building the counter economy. I love it. This is really amazing program you've got, John. So super stoked about that. Let me get you back on here. And let's see if we can make this happen. There we go. Yeah, so that's a really good course. And then you also had a thing in there on the Exodus wallet and all the details on setting one of those up. And it's just really comprehensive. And most of those videos are what would you say, about 5 to 10 minutes long, so you can just jump into little pieces as you need it. And yeah, so we'll have a way that you can sign up for John's course down below. I'm going to pop in here the this is the sales page, so that way you can recognize it when you get there. And yeah, it's a really fantastic course, and I highly recommend it. John, I really, really appreciate your time today. I know for me, it's very important that the Grow Network be resilient and have access. And we talked about having multiple facets of resiliency. And, some people gave me some flack a while ago for promoting gold and silver. And I'm like, no, it's vitally important that you have financial resources. The US dollar is definitely dying. Every single fiat currency in the world is dying. I believe crypto is here to stay, and it will be a part of the future. And so it's really important to learn, and I really appreciate the course materials that you've put together and how you've simplified it and made it easy access, especially for those of us that just don't want to deal with technology anymore. Any final words? And would love to, any final wrap up?
Yeah, so if folks haven't got involved yet, or if they purchased some on Coinbase, for example, but they haven't moved to the non-custodial wallet, like this really is a critical technology, just like Marjory shared. The central bank digital currencies are being rolled out, and it's only a matter of time. It's not if, but when. So if free people want to continue to do business with one another, especially online, this is the tool for us to use: Bitcoin and privacy coins like Monero. And so with the course, we just try to make it as simple as possible. I've been teaching people cryptocurrency for, I don't know, 8 or 10 years now. So I've really learned how to help folks that struggle with technology to make it as simple and as accessible as possible. So for folks that are sitting on the fence or they have reservations, I still think it's a wonderful technology for free people, for people to protect and preserve wealth. And really excited that you had me on to share this with your audience. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, John, and we'll have you back on again. So see you all later. We'll probably create a forum thread, and if you want to do a little bit of crypto trading back and forth, and when you've taken the course, let me know. We might could do that with little tiny bits, so that way you can experience it. It'd be a lot of fun to do together. So anyway, thank you, John, and we'll see you again on another segment.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Right. Stop recording. Yeah.